Families have a lot going on. Let Ollie help manage the mental load with new cognitive help supplements for everyone 4 and up, like delicious Lolly Focus Pops or Lolly Mellow Pops for kids. And for parents, try 3 new Brainy Chews to help you focus, chill out, or get energized. Find these cognitive health buddies for the whole fam at ollie.com. That's OLLY.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Conservative. Constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, the Louisville Juneteenth Festival comes under fire for being too inclusive. Pro-Palestinian protests break out at the University of Kentucky, and we see the latest example of how tricky bills can muddle voting records and to create claims that are at best half true in order to run cover for otherwise terrible politicians. So we'll have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. I hope everybody's having a fantastic Friday. It is coming up the last weekend of turkey season. So if you haven't filled your 2 tags, I hope you get a chance to get out there, though. But before we dig into all those stories, I do have an initial story I want to cover, at least something I want to talk about that comes from earlier in this week. So earlier in this week, we had on Tony Florence, who talked about the House Bill 11, which banned tens of thousands of vapor products. And through our interview, we discussed how when this bill takes effect, around 450 vapor stores will close and thousands of employees will lose their jobs in Kentucky. And for the most part, and those of you who don't follow me on social media, which, shameless plug, follow me on social media. You can check me out on Facebook. Just search Andrew Cooperrider. Check me out on Twitter, at KY Cooperrider. Follow me there. But every day, I generally, right before our post drops or our new episode drops, right around 10 a.m. or so, I will make a post regarding that day's topics. And so I had made a post on my socials that simply said, unless successful in their lawsuit, 450 vapor stores will close and thousands of employees will lose their jobs due to Kentucky passing House Bill 11. House Bill 11 bans tens of thousands of e-cig and vapor products that are not banned by the federal government at the state level. This will leave only 7 currently sold product lines available for purchase, all of them owned by big tobacco companies. It should make everyone very uncomfortable and upset that our state government would close down hundreds of businesses and leave thousands jobless at the behest of corporate donors. Now, that's pretty straightforward. You'd think that'd be somebody left, right, center we should all be able to agree with. Actually, something I even said during the conversation, during the interview, was that you don't have to like vapor stores or anything else, but to say that they're the thing that needs to be banned out of our society, if we're going to go on a banning kick, not saying we should, but if we do go on a banning kick, to say that we need to start with e-cigarette vapor stores, they're the scourge of society, is just patently ridiculous. But despite that, and most people agreeing that it's ridiculous, there was one comment from an individual on my Facebook, and he says, I'm not mad about it. Most of the vape stores are selling to minors and even selling them THC vapes. The biggest problem statewide in the school system at the high school level is vaping. If this makes it harder for underage people to get vapes, then I'm all in. So let's break this down, because Greg just said a whole lot of things. Now, he doesn't provide any facts or backing up. He doesn't say how he came to these conclusions, so we're going to look through about everything he said. He said most of the vape stores are selling to minors and even selling them THC vapes. Now, first, anybody who listens to the show a long time knows that I was and am a big advocate of things like porn websites having to verify the age of their viewers before they deliver content. And that is because it is illegal to sell that to minors. So unless you're going to argue that it should be legal for minors to have access to that kind of content, well, then it falls within the purview of government and others to say, hey, look, you have to enforce the laws. If you're going to make a profit off this, you have to enforce the law. Now, in the same way, these vape stores are not to be selling to people under 21. If you want to argue that they should be allowed to sell it to people under 21, then talk about that. But that's not what's going on here. What Greg, that's his name, is saying on Facebook here is that he believes most of the vapor stores are selling to minors. This is an enforced thing. Like, people go in and try to pop these vapor stores, convenience stores, and other things because it's enforced through the ABC board for selling to underage people. And in fact, there have been places in trouble for selling to underage individuals. And most of those places, like the vast majority, were not these vapor stores that Greg Hill says most of the vape stores are selling to minors. It's the convenience stores. And what do the convenience stores sell? They sell the major tobacco lines. They're not selling these boutique lines that these individual small vapor stores are selling. They're selling the Juul and other things. And it was Juul, by the way, who got in trouble for marketing to minors, and Juul is still on the market under this bill. So off the bat, his claim that most of the vape stores are selling to minors and even selling them THC vapes is false. Most of the vape stores are not, because they're worried they're not going to sell to a minor and then risk losing their entire business. And then if that isn't a ridiculous enough claim, Greg here follows up with the biggest problem statewide in the school system at the high school level is vaping. Now, granted, like I said, you don't have to like vaping. Like, you don't have to, I don't smoke cigarettes. I don't vape. I don't really use tobacco much at all unless I'm smoking a cigar, maybe over a glass of whiskey, bourbon. But to be honest, I'm more into Irish whiskey. But anyways, I don't smoke. But at the same time, I'm able to dissect myself from this weird craze of trying to take away from other people doing things that really only kind of affect themselves most of all. I mean, tobacco has been a part of our culture for a very, very long time. And it's gotten us here, right? But Greg claims that the biggest problem statewide in the school system, at the high school level, is vaping. I don't think that's accurate, Greg. I think the biggest problem in our school system at the high school level is the fact that kids can't read and do math. And unless your claim is that the kids are vaping instead of reading and doing math, it makes absolutely no sense what you're claiming here. The biggest problem is vaping? When I was in high school, okay, this was before e-cigarettes were really a thing, or I don't think they were a thing. I don't remember people doing it. But I tell you what I do remember, okay, is people would dip. Multiple kids in a classroom would dip, and they would have these like 32-ounce Polar Pop cups that come from the convenience stores, and you get the cup and you get the straw. They'd get something with a straw, and they would dip in class and then spit down the straw into the cup. So when they were spitting, it made it look like they were drinking a soda, but really they were spitting their dip spit. Or they would just use snus and swallow it. Like several kids a class. And yet, our spending rate compared to ability to read, write, and do math was much better. Literally, kids forever have been using tobacco products in schools. And yet, schools haven't been turning out such horrible students the entire history of America. They were turning out kids that could read and write and do math better, that could behave better, and spent far less doing it. And guess what? Tobacco was being used too then. Okay, the biggest problem statewide isn't vaping, Greg. Then he goes on to say, if this makes it harder for underage people to get vapes, then I'm all in. If you want to say we should ban vaping, then just make that argument. But to claim we should shut down small individual vaping stores just in order to stop kids from getting vaping, that doesn't make any sense. It's already too illegal to sell to minors, and it's already enforced. The logic of banning something for adults so minors don't get it would apply to every single age-controlled product there is, from spray paint to booze. You need a show ID to buy spray paint. because kids cause problems with it. Is what Greg's saying here is that he'd be fine if we ban spray paint because kids don't need it? Would he be fine saying, hey, we should just ban alcohol? We shouldn't sell alcohol at all because that makes sure that underage kids don't get it. It makes it harder for them. So, yeah, let's do it. No, Greg, actually, you're forcing more people into the convenience stores where they sell to kids underage, and they're buying the products like Juul that were marketed to kids in the first place, instead of saying, hey, look, if we need to enforce our laws, better let's enforce our laws. But we don't need to take away the ability of adults to get a product that they've been allowed to have for years at the behest of big corporate donors, and then to wrap it in, it's for the kids. It's absolutely ridiculous. Well, coming up after this, we'll be digging into Juneteenth. In Louisville, celebration came under attack for being too inclusive. We'll have that after this short break.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
If you're struggling to lose weight, you've probably heard about weight loss medications like Wegovy or Zepbound, and you might be wondering if they're right for you. Meet PlushCare, a leading telehealth provider with doctors who are there for you day and night to partner with you in your weight loss journey. If you qualify, they can safely prescribe you medication from the comfort of your own home. To get started, visit plushcare.com/weight-loss. That's plushcare.com/weight-loss. plushcare.com/weight-loss.
And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So the Louisville Juneteenth Festival came under fire for being too inclusive. I'm not kidding. That's what the claim is. So the Juneteenth Festival in Louisville put out a save-the-date kind of prerequisite graphic. And instead of calling it a Juneteenth celebration, they called it a Looneteenth celebration. Like as in, it's Louisville. So, get it? Juneteenth, Looneteenth. Anyways, this was met with massive outrage on social media as people called it tone deaf and black erasure or whitewashing. Let me be clear. I personally, and I know some people won't agree with my opinion, but, this is just me. I don't mind Juneteenth at all. Actually, I think it's a great idea for an American holiday as a whole, because really it's we're celebrating a point in U.S. history where we lived up to the founding principles of our country, of our Constitution, the founding principles of liberty for all humans, regardless of their skin color. Now, obviously, though, what should be a completely normal celebration, I think all of us could be able to celebrate. We should all be able to celebrate the idea that we got closer to fulfilling the idea of liberty and justice for all Americans, right? That should be something we can all join in on, regardless of your skin color. We should all be able to be proud of it, regardless of your skin color. But I understand it's been tinged by the George Floyd and the BLM stuff because it kind of popped up after that. And so it's just, another kind of viewed as a black holiday, quote unquote. But I think it's something we should generally all be able to join in on. There's not really a reason per se to be against the concept other than the fact that a bunch of people that you politically don't agree with created it as a political statement, which that obviously will affect a whole lot of the ways you view things. But now, anyone in their actual right mind, though, wouldn't, unless you're looking for a way to be a professional victim, of course, nobody in their right mind would be upset about them calling Juneteenth Looneteenth in Louisville. I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, if Louisville created their 4th of July celebration and they called it, I don't know, July 4th. Get it? July, Louisville, July. So if they called it July 4th, I wouldn't give it a second of thought. I wouldn't even be mad about it. I might be like, that's kind of a dumb pun. Just like I kind of think the Looneteenth, if I'm mad about it at all, it's just a dumb pun. But I'm not going to be upset about it enough to throw a fit about it. And objectively speaking, I would say, too, that if you're going to be upset, if I want to be upset over July 4th, no matter your skin color, you shouldn't be upset over Juneteenth. Because if we're talking about what's more important, or should be more important in your mind, it would be, far and away, the celebration of our Constitution. That should be more important than Juneteenth, because it's the founding principles in that Constitution which created the arguments for free men and women to be treated equally, and for that to be a principle that we strive to live up to. A principle that's in our founding documents and constitutions. Notice I said S there, constitutions, because there's technically was two. We revised one to make this one. But anyways, well, not really revised, we just rewrote. But anyways, without that principle, though, of liberty and justice for all, Juneteenth would have never happened. Maybe. It would have been maybe a lot longer to convince people that this is a part of our founding of our country. This is what we should strive to do. Now, for the organizers' part of this happening, they claimed, they initially named it Juneteenth in order to be more inclusive. They said that they wanted it to be clearer that all of Louisville can come together and celebrate this, but they should have known that this isn't the type of inclusivity people are looking for. They want the kind of inclusivity that actually means to exclude people, specifically, of course, white people. They don't want this to be an American celebration of American people attaining an American ideal of liberty for all. They don't want that. They want this to be a very exclusive celebration for a very specific group of people. So exclusive, in fact, that the same critics of the Juneteenth celebration flyer saying Juneteenth had another gripe online, another complaint, and that was the colors. For you see, on the flyer, they used, and you're going to be aghast at this, you're just going to be blown away, they used the colors red, white, and blue, to represent America. And they called this also white erasure, black erasure, whitewashing, and tone death, because they didn't use the Pan-African flag colors like the red, black, and yellow, or whatever, green. I don't, the colors, the Pan-African colors. So not only were they offended over trying to make it feel like all of Louisville can celebrate this is a fantastic and actually inclusive, not inclusive in the way the lefties mean it, but inclusive in the way that regardless of your skin color or gender or anything, you should all be able to celebrate this. So they weren't just offended over that. They were also mad that the event organizers had the audacity to use the nation's colors that they live in, the nation that created the Constitution, that led to the fight to have freedom and justice for all. They were so upset they had the audacity to use the nation's colors that they belong to, that they live in. And so the organization putting on the Louisville Juneteenth celebration apologized and changed everything. They changed it back to Juneteenth. They put out a new graphic with the Pan-African flag colors on it. I mean, that's how far we have fallen in this country, even here in Kentucky. You cannot have a celebration of American history and put the colors of the American flag on it without being called racist and bigoted. And this is what causes these really big divisions in this country. And I actually don't know where we're going to end up in a decade or two. I mean, we've got the Louisville Juneteenth Festival. And we're trying to celebrate us working towards and fulfilling the founding principles of liberty. And they have to apologize for putting the American flag on there. Meanwhile, you've got protests going on all around the nation, in case you missed it, of people shouting and chanting death to America. I mean, this is, we as a country are becoming suicidal. We, for some reason, are full of people who don't want to be here, that hate this country, and want to destroy it, but at the same time won't leave it. And if something doesn't give here, and if we don't have something tuned down, if we don't achieve some sort of understanding of how we can even exist together, I do not know where this ends. I mean, they should be thinking themselves that they're lucky to be here in America. I could go through a lot of American history and world history to point to why all these people should be so very excited that they ended up in America. The best privilege of all, the best privilege you could be born with in this world is to be born an American. I could give you all the examples why, but preaching to the choir here, it'd probably fall on their deaf ears. But speaking of protests and the pro-Palestinian protests that we see going on all around the country, well, Kentucky hasn't been spared from it. This Wednesday, a pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, whatever you want to call it, protest came to the University of Kentucky. Now, one would say, I mean, at a time where we have a former president being put on trial for treason, for simply saying, go forward peacefully and protest, that it would be pretty easy for everybody to agree that somebody shouting death to America would be a treasonous individual. That seems pretty straightforward, because you're saying death to your country. You think we'd agree, but regardless, we still have this growing, I guess you'd call it growing. I don't know how much it's growing. I actually think they're losing quite a lot of people as they go, as they do more and more ridiculous things. The same kind of way that Black Lives Matter started out strong and then it kind of wind down and ended up creating a whole lot of people who suddenly felt a lot more comfortable calling them what they are. Anti-American, and I think we're starting to see the same thing here. But so these protests came to the University of Kentucky, and we have some moments from that protest that I want to go over with you. And, you know, one thing to know is they kind of announced this protest would be coming into town, and I put that in quotations, coming into town, because it kind of did come into town. And the University of Kentucky put out some flyers onto the campus there, giving people rules and regulations to follow in order to head off some of the problems we saw at places and are seeing at places like UCLA and Columbia. And the University of Kentucky, of course, isn't having issues like that, but, I don't think handing out those flyers made a whole lot of sense. I'll go over why. I'm coming up on a break. If you want to reach out to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, feel free to reach out. You can email info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. You can also head on over to theandrewshow.com, hit the Listen Now tab. You can see all the different places to listen. If you're listening to this on the radio, you want to check out old shows, you can do that there. And, of course, if you want to reach out to the show right from the website, you can hit the Contact tab. Touch that tab. It'll take you to a contact form where you can fill it out and reach out to the show. But otherwise, we'll be back covering the UK pro-University of Kentucky, pro-Palestine protest after this short.
Mom deserves the best, and there's no better place to shop for Mother's Day than Whole Foods Market. They're your destination for unbeatable savings, from premium gifts to show-stopping flowers and irresistible desserts. Start by saving 33% with Prime on all body care and candles. Then get a 15-stem bunch of tulips for just $9.99 each with Prime. Round out Mom's menu with festive rosé, irresistible berry chantilly cake, and more special treats. Come celebrate Mother's Day at Whole Foods Market.
Break. And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So before the break, I was going over how University of Kentucky had the pro-Palestine, anti-Israel, whatever you want to call them, protests came to town. And they hand out these cards telling people what rules to follow and to head off the issues we saw at places like UCLA and Columbia. And it was peaceful, a lot more peaceful. So, good there. We have some moments, though, from that protest I want to share with you. Here is particularly videos emerging out of that, showing a little girl on the shoulders of an adult chanting some different slogans. Let's take a listen here.
Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine.
Now, I know it kind of cut off there at the beginning, but she was chanting From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and the adults were following along. Now, I know I don't often talk about national politics, and honestly, I don't slaughter me for it, but I think you can have a wide range of opinions on this whole Israel versus Hamas Gaza Strip conflict. You can think Israel is doing something wrong, disagree with the level of American involvement, etc. And you wouldn't be necessarily crossing my mind into crazy towns. I may disagree with you on some different aspects of things, like whether or not Israel is doing something wrong. I may disagree with you on the level of American involvement. I may think America needs less involvement. I may think that we should just leave Israel alone to handle their business and America needs to worry about America. I could have that opinion and you may think differently. I'm not saying I do have that opinion, but I'm just saying I could, and you could think differently. And I really don't need your emails about this because this isn't what we talk about. You listen to the show about Kentucky politics. But anyways, my point is though, is you could be calling out Israel for activities, and I think it's okay for you to do that. I don't think it makes you a radical, anti-Semite, horrible person. And I think people generally probably need to divorce a little more in their heads Israel from Jewish people. Like they're not necessarily one and the same thing. So you can disagree with Israel, not be an anti-Semitic person, but you don't tune in though for my opinion on foreign policy. You want information, commentary on Kentucky issues. So we'll try to veer much more back there. But where we get off on the crazy trains is things like that chant, from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free. That chant. Anyone who tells you that's a peaceful, totally nonviolent chant, that's a normal, peaceful thing to say, is either an idiot or being extremely disingenuous for most likely political reasons, because the area they're talking about, and they're talking about the river and the sea, is the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. That's the river, that's the sea. That covers like all of Israel. So keep in mind, Palestinians are Arab people, and for all of history, including now, Arab people do not include people of Jewish descent. There is a delineation and difference between the two. And so to say this chant another way that may make more sense to Americans, let me paint a different picture here for you. And let me say this in a way that maybe you can understand why this chant is bad. If I had my son on my shoulders and I had him leading a chant that was like from the Pacific to the Atlantic, a white nation would be fantastic. I know it's not very sing-songy, and it's the best I can kind of come up with here on the spot. And I'm not going to come up with racist chants because I have no need for them. But how do you think people would take that? Do you think they would take that as a chant of freedom and peace? Or do you think they would say I'm calling for genocide? And that is pretty much what these people are saying, and I don't think that should be necessarily glossed over. I think we should wonder what are they trying to get at, because it's those kinds of chants and people that now lead to individuals shouting "Death to America" and it being okay. Now, for the University of Kentucky's part on these pro-Palestine and anti-Israel protests, as I said, they handed out cards the day before with some of the rules to make sure people understood what free speech limits were on campus, or where you cross from free speech into not free speech, such as things like normal time and place restrictions. What is reasonable and a part of free speech? You can have your protests. That's fine. You protest about anything you want to. But you can't do a heckler's veto. You can't call for violence. And you can't infringe on other people's free speech rights too. You can't impede operations of others, time and place, like holding signs on the roadways. You can do, yelling on the roadways you could do, but you start to block roadways, stop traffic. Well, now you're not doing free speech. You've crossed into the illegal realms. Chanting on campus and doing stuff with your voice, that's fine. Blocking people from going to class or trying to stop classes from going on, well, now you're running into time and place restrictions. And your First Amendment rights do not get to infringe on the rights of other people's First Amendment. That's pretty simple. So University of Kentucky did hand out that card, which would seem was a pretty useless process. Because as most people at the UK protests weren't even UK students. So the fact they handed it out to UK students doesn't matter because they weren't even UK students, mostly. It was many adults and children. And they clearly didn't get the message on the card because, as you can hear in the video, they're using a megaphone like loudspeaker. And one of the rules that University of Kentucky handed out on the cards was you're not to use loudspeakers or anything to amplify your voice. But I wanted to point that out. That's mostly not UK students, which leads to the question I have about why is this being held at UK then? Like, if UK students want to protest something, that makes sense. You know, maybe they can't travel. Not everybody has cars. So instead they're going to protest on the campus. Okay. But if you don't go to UK and you travel to the University of Kentucky to protest, wouldn't it make more sense to do your protests like downtown or at the Frankfurt State Capitol or someplace like that? That would make more sense than the university. Like, what is the university doing when it comes to Israel and Gaza that wouldn't be better placed at like city centers or at state capitals? Like, they would be doing more. I think that would make more sense. I mean, take the Black Lives Matter protests. Well, I personally disagree with their protests. And when it changed from a protest to riots and destruction, that isn't free speech. But when they were just protesting, and they did it in Lexington, they protest. I think they crossed the line a few times in Lexington. But mainly they just protested in Lexington. They were protesting in front of the police station. And they were demanding changes to police policy. I mean, most of them, 99.999% of them, can't tell you exactly what policy they wanted to change. But they did want to change at that police department. So it makes sense that that's where you would protest. But University of Kentucky, just saying, it makes more sense in Frankfurt, at least maybe downtown Lexington, even if you already got people traveling there. But something else was said at that protest. I want you to take a listen.
Hey Joe Biden, what do you say? How many kids have you killed today? How many kids have you killed today? Hey Joe Biden, what do you say? Hey Joe Biden, what do you say? How many kids have you killed today? How many kids have you killed today? Free.
So that chant was, hey Joe Biden, what do you say? How many kids did you kill today? Which, you know, for a second, I thought possibly a pro-life, anti-abortion rally broke out at the pro-Palestinian protest. But sadly, they aren't referencing the mass slaughter of unborn American children, you know, something going on right in their own backyards. But instead, they're referencing the dubious claims coming out of Hamas and Gaza. And this does spell some problems for Joe Biden. I mean, reportedly at the rally at the University of Kentucky, they were telling people not to vote for Joe Biden in November, which, I mean, obviously Kentucky was already going to be going to Trump, but I have to imagine they're saying these same things into swing states, which suddenly I'm even more on their side for some reason. I kind of want to see these protests continue because, I mean, the parody here is hilarious. You have a bunch of liberals who would be killed for their beliefs and behaviors in Gaza that's run by Hamas in like 5 seconds, protesting in their favor by telling people to basically ensure Trump will win. I mean, how do we end up here? And not only that, but this protest, the more they protest like this, the more it's pushing more of the centrist moderate people towards Trump because they see how crazy on everything the left is. And they see Joe Biden's how he's capitulating to these people. But at the same time, they're also telling leftists, far leftists, not to vote for Joe Biden. So when you look in these swing states, it's like he's losing both moderates and his base at the same time somehow with this. And I'm here for it. What a dumb political move. Well, coming up after this, we'll be going over a few things we saw going on with a mailer coming out of one campaign. We'll have that after this short break. And you're back in this final segment here on a Friday of the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So, one thing that I talked about earlier in this year, I think a couple of weeks ago, was I talked about what happened on Senate Bill 191. Okay, so for those of you who don't remember, let's break this back down. So you have DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives in our college campuses and universities. And what those are, DEI sounds great, diversity, equity, and inclusion, but the net result of this, and I know many of you already know, but for those of you who don't, bears repeating, the DEI initiatives end up saying that if you don't have enough minorities, enough black people going to your universities, well, you're going to get less funding. That was the net result. That's what the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education was actually doing. They would tie the amount of funding these public colleges and universities would receive to whether or not they hit certain racial quota goals. And obviously, requiring certain racial quotas in order to receive funding is racist, because that the net result of that is you now are making decisions about who you do business with as a university. So who you accept as a student into your college and universities based upon their skin color. Absolutely ridiculous. And so that had to be dealt with, but there was a bill proposed, Senate Bill 6, which was an overreaching DEI bill. It came out of the Senate doing a little bit something different. It went into the House, and it changed a bit. It got stronger in some ways and not as strong in others. But it mainly, though, what the bill ended up doing, the net result of Senate Bill 6 when it hit the House floor, was banning colleges and universities from mandating that these DEI initiatives, critical race theory initiatives, this gender theory, not gender theory, but the racial theory stuff, couldn't be mandated to be taught to the students and in a way that was factual. If you were going to mandate that students cover those topics as a part of their curriculum for a major, you could not present things that are not factual as factual. They had to be clear that they were debatable and to protect something called viewpoint diversity. That's a dirty word to the leftists, but to protect viewpoint diversity. Well, Senate Bill 6, though, got changed in the House, and that means now the Senate would have to have called it up for a vote for concurrence. And that vote for concurrence, the president of CPE, took issue with, because he was making money off creating textbooks for these classes. And he's good friends with Robert Stivers, the president of the Senate. And so Senate Bill 6 was never called back up for voting. But that didn't fix the fact that you had this unconstitutional practice going on at CPE of mandating racial quotas in order to tie their funding to it. And so Senate Bill 191, which was a general college funding bill, had an addition made to it in the final 2 days to say that universities could not create racial acceptance quotas, and that couldn't be tied to their funding. And it was such a non-controversial thing and so kind of required in order to stop the Attorney General from suing CPE and colleges and universities and the governor in turn, that the governor could have vetoed it and squashed that, but instead he signed the piece of legislation and it went into law. And I mentioned at the time how what happened on Senate Bill 191 will give cover to those who worked against Senate Bill 6 or these other DEI initiatives that isn't actually for them. They were able to vote yes on this because it did the very, very, very bare minimum, such bare minimum that not even Andy Beshear, far-left governor, had an issue with it. You may remember me saying that. Well, recently, Killian Timoney in the 45th House District race sent out a mailer claiming he voted to stop liberal DEI racial metrics at colleges and universities. But if we rewind to Senate Bill 6, remember I talked about when it hit the House floor, what all it did. It was dealing with actually addressing the DEI issues. Timoney was the only Republican to vote no on that bill. So his claim that he voted to stop liberal DEI racial metrics at colleges and universities is not based upon his vote on Senate Bill 6. Why? Because he voted against Senate Bill 6. He voted against stopping students from being mandated to take DEI classes. He agrees that students should be allowed to take, should be forced and mandated to take DEI classes, and it should be a required part of universities, and it can be taught as fact. That's everything that bill did, and he voted no on that. But he did vote yes on Senate Bill 191, which just simply ended racial quotas for acceptance, didn't defund and get rid of the DEI offices on university campuses like Senate Bill 6 would have. And so now he can claim that he stopped liberal DEI racial metrics at colleges and universities, even though he did nothing. And this is a perfect example of how these half votes or no votes can muddy the waters and why staying informed constantly and consistently is so important. You literally have a House rep that votes in the complete opposite way. And then come election season, he's able to roll out, because as long as he can justify it some sort of way, he feels comfortable doing it. Whether he's lying to himself about whether or not he's lying, or if he's just saying, look, I feel completely comfortable making this claim. I can somehow back it up. I know I'm not representing the truth. I know I don't really believe in that, but I need to message on that, so that's what I'll message on. And he'll push that out there. But the question becomes, why don't you just vote that way? Like, if you know that's the way your voters want you to vote, so much so that you have to lie about your voting record and you need to muddy the waters, why not just actually do the thing that they want you to do? Why do you lie, cheat, and do all these things, bend over backwards in order to misrepresent what you're doing, in order to do the wrong thing? You're literally the only Republican who voted no on Senate Bill 6. Why? If you're not going to be a Republican, just say you're not a Republican. That's fine. It's the lying that gets me more than anything. It's not just the lying, though. It's the completely misrepresenting who you are and what you actually believe for personal gain. And it bothers me so much. And the only way we can cut through this absolute just garbage that these, not run of the mill, but establishment politicians keep peddling and attacking people on, is if we stay informed and don't let our votes be bought off by dumb little mailers, by ads that are being played out there that are saying all kinds of things that most likely aren't true. Because, I mean, frankly, this is why we keep getting what we're getting. I mean, people the other day, we were talking about Mitch McConnell came up in a conversation. It came up and they were talking about how in 2020 they had to vote for Amy McGrath, and then in 2014 the other option was Allison Lundergan Grimes, so they had to vote for Mitch McConnell there, and they mentioned that, but I asked them, yeah, but did you vote for Bevin? Did you vote for like Wesley Morgan in 2020? And they're like, who's that? Or they actually, they know who Bevin is. Clearly, he used to be our governor. But they were flabbergasted. They had no clue that Bevin ran in a primary against Mitch McConnell. He actually did pretty well, too. And he ran in a primary against Mitch McConnell before he ran for governor. And that's why we keep getting bad politicians. It's not just Democrat versus Republican. You can show up in the primary and make smart, intelligent votes and really change the outcome of not just what's going on locally, because, individually you make a big difference locally. I mean, your magistrate, your judge executive, your state house rep elections in the primaries, I mean, they're decided by sometimes handfuls of votes. Only a few thousand people show up to vote. I mean, you get active in those elections, you can make a huge, huge difference. But also those positions feed into the national level. I mean, Brett Guthrie was I believe a state senator before he ran for Congress. And Comer was ag commissioner. And before that, I believe he was a state house rep. Mitch McConnell was a judge executive. Thomas Massey, judge executive before he ran for office. Joe Biden was a county council, was what he ran for before he ran for federal senator, which is the same as a magistrate would be here in Kentucky. Those local level elections is what feeds into those higher level elections. That's why being active is so important and cutting through the garbage. Well, y'all, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. We'll see you back here on Monday. I hope you have a great weekend. Till Monday, we'll see you.